Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's bring this meeting to order. Do we have somebody taking minutes? I guess we don't.
My understanding is the program records and that recording can be retrieved later. I will talk about the minutes. Dennis had asked for it, and but I will describe it when we start.
Okay, I am going to ask everybody to mute their microphones because we're already getting a bunch of noise leaking through. Not that there's any background noise happening in your background, but just electronics generates its own noise. So I don't know how we're going to take roll call if we don't have somebody here taking minutes. That's one of my issues.
As I mentioned, it is automatically supposed to record it, so we can go through that.
Okay. We have a Jay Giannotti on here. Who is that?
That's one of our planners.
One of your guys? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we don't have minutes from the last meeting, as you all have seen from the emails that went back and forth, but we will have them eventually. So we will defer the approval of the minutes for right now. The next item, I neglected to pull my minutes out. I think it is just to begin the meeting with your presentation. Is that correct, Tagi?
A welcome sort of for everybody either could be done by you or I think we had volunteered Craig, but I don't know if he's online or not, but just welcome everybody and we can start.
Okay, and we do have a new member, excuse me, Joan McInerney has volunteered to serve with the rest of us. And so, Joan, you know, some of the people here, Dennis and me and Doug is the person who's called Nexus 5X. We're missing Vince, and I think that's everybody. Is it? That's actually on the committee. Of course, Brian is our interface with the town council, and Tagi is our presenter. And then the other person that's here is Jenny Cobb, who is our engineer, correct?
Yes, he's an engineering part of the consulting team.
Right. Okay. So Dennis DeVito had submitted some questions. Tagi, do you want to just answer those all at once, or do you want to just get to them as we go through the presentation?
I'd like to, if that's okay with everybody, I'd like them to start, and I will start with those questions and go over the agenda, and then we will address. I think today, benefit of everybody, I will address them during the course of this presentation because he did have specific questions about a specific item or a slide, and I think it would be everybody would be better served than as we get to these slides. I can explain that questions. I do have his questions in front of me, and all highlighted, so we will get to it. If everybody's okay with it, I'm ready to start.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Great. So we are. I want to start by thanking everybody, and you already welcome Joan, and I want to also welcome her. And since our last meeting, we had that we lost one of our members, and that added to Brian's work. And I know he was very diligently looking to for replacement, but how the government works and meeting once a month. So all of those sort of contributed to delay of this meeting. We're all set now. I am so glad, and as I'm working with all of you, I've had the pleasure of talking and exchanging emails with certainly with Joan and Dennis and really and you, Donna, and it is refreshing. So I look forward to working with you and continuing this process. What we have in today's agenda, uh, we have called the whole meeting as or this presentation as a sort of condition assessment, and this is existing conditions, and we are going to provide or present a baseline information about the land use and the community. We will also discuss at the end of our presentation, and I'm hoping that during that time we will really get your input. You're all expert in this area, or each one of you bring a certain level of expertise in these. So I'm hoping that we will uh, everybody will benefit from everybody's expertise. So we will talk about development capacity, and we will also talk about anticipated development. And Dennis, and I want to thank you, Dennis, for taking your time and writing that page. It is, as I said, it's great that you do have an interest. And but we are going to talk about anticipated development and our assumptions for that, for those numbers that you have seen. We we will start actually with a recap of last presentation as a sort of refresher. I know all of you have seen this before, and because of Joan's arrival, I thought that may give opportunity for her if she has any questions to again ask, and we can move forward. And the last but not the least is when do we want to have our next meeting? And I think I had put an agenda, a sort of with a question mark when potential meeting will be, but you will need to make that decision. The next meeting we will get to it later on. The next meeting will primarily be focused on the existing condition for transportation, and that would be Denny's presentation, and he's already sent me his presentation for me to send it to you. So as soon as you're available, we can have that meeting. At the end of my presentation, we will discuss that date and hopefully set it up something that would be most convenient for everybody. So let's. Is everybody okay with the agenda?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's recap what we discussed previously. Is what is the road impact fee? We went through it. It's a one-time charge that the town will charge every development. Depending on the type of development, the charge will vary. And this is the first time that the town has or trying to establish a road impact fee. The town already has a parks impact fee, and but this would be the second impact fee that the town is imposing. That St. John is not alone in having this type of fee. Other developing communities also have it and use this as a as a tool to raise dollars for transportation improvements. It is the rationale for this fee, as far as the town is concerned, is you face it on a daily basis, and the traffic is tremendous, and and I think Danny is going to share with you next time we meet some of the recent improvements since last 5 years, how they have impacted the traffic. So any improvements you do make, it will have some impact, positive impact. Um, we talked about, as I mentioned, different types of impact fee that the statute allows, and road impact fee is one of them. One of the items that we discussed last time was the cost and benefits of the impact fee, and we went through the whole list of items that we discussed in terms of its benefits, as well as the cost. The cost of it is primarily centers around increasing the development cost and potentially impacting negatively the market. Uh, as far as the authority of the town for imposing this fee, that authority is given to municipalities by the state law, and that state law establishes a certain level of process, methodology, calculations methods for adopting an impact fee. So what we go through in this process, we are trying and we will try to meet all of the criteria that is in the statute for imposing or exacting such a fee for the town. And the statute also requires several other items as a part of establishment of the fee. One of them is the town has to, or municipality has to, establish an infrastructure improvement zone that is also sometimes called impact zone. That's the area that is covered by this fee. In most cases, the fee covers the whole community, but there are areas that such fee has been established to cover less than the full corporate boundaries of the town. But that is some action that you will be required, and we're going to ask you to officially accept that. Hopefully, at the end of Denny's presentation next time, when you have all the information, and then you can make that decision whether or not the whole town should be established as an impact zone or a portion of it. Another state requirement is establishment of a zone improvement plan. That is what we are doing. That is the impact fee study. Statute calls it zone improvement plan. And at the end of this process, we will develop, we have already started writing it, and a plan or a study or a document that will serve as the zone improvement plan, which includes all of the materials that we have presented here. One of the other requirements of the state is that it has to be the whole study, the whole determination of the fee has to be reasonable. And naturally, being reasonable means different things to different people, but we are taking actions to the extent that we can determine in some of these. Our evaluation is using that reasonableness as a part of our analysis. So that's the state requirements. There are some other requirements, authorities, I should say, at the federal level. And at the federal level, we the federal law considers this development exactions, as what they call it, and as an item that is subject to the Fifth Amendment for prohibition of taking. And those of you that have been involved with development, taking is a big, big issue. There are a couple of Supreme Court decisions related to that, and we are very much aware of it. But generally, the federal statute requires that the fee must substantially advance a legitimate government interest, and that is what the federal requirements are. These two cases that I mentioned by Supreme Court, both of them discuss the proportionality and reasonableness of the fee. Again, the proportionality of the fee means that it has to be proportional to the impact of a development, not more than that. In other words, the fee or the charge cannot be higher than the actual impact. Uh, we extensively talked last time again as to what are the fees are used for, and there are a variety of types of development, future development that can be paid by this fee. And perhaps the most important item is uh, what's called the project demand impact, and that is a development causes some impact, and that the fee can be used uh, to address that impact. And there are other uses of the fee, what's called the capitalized interest or carrying cost. If the town issues a bond that for some improvements, bond can be paid by the impact fee cost. One of the important item that we discussed is the impact fee cannot be used for operational expenses of the town or pay for any improvements that addresses some existing deficiencies or shortfalls. This is current. The fee has to be used for any type of improvements that is generated by new developments, not uh, existing deficiencies. And you will see when Danny talks and brings in his numbers, he's going to have a big chunk of numbers. Says, well, these are the deficiencies that exist, but you can't use the impact fee for it because these are existing. So maintenance costs, existing deficiencies, those types of, and operational costs, those are not eligible costs that you can pay uh, with this fee.
So,
The
Augie, if we have a question, can we ask during the discussion, or do you want us to wait till the end?
If it is short, I think I have no problem answering it. I don't
Okay,
want to
I'll
sort
wait now to the end
go
then.
in different direction. Yeah, go ahead. Would you want to
I'll go
wait?
at the end. That's great. Yeah, I'll wait till the end then. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Uh, the assessment process, we went through that. The impact fee by the statute and by tradition has been viewed as a sort of comprehensive evaluation of the consequences of development in a community. We have seen in other communities that use this process as a planning process to address and literally looking at the whole transportation issues within the town in a more holistic way. So it is something some communities are doing, and by integrating this with their planning process, and they can manage their growth better, and they based on their comprehensive plan and the zoning. I think we used an example last time. I showed it, and that was clearly the case of, I think it was Chick-fil-A, that on some corner street with cars uh, sort of waiting on the street on that corner to so these people that wanted to go to Chick-fil-A would be served, uh, and so the question becomes is, do we really want to have, I'm not heading Chick-fil-A, by the way. I was there last night. But do we really want to have a Chick-fil-A on this corner when we see that it is a popular facility? Similar sort of thing is, we sort of showed a, do we really want to see a gas station on this corner when we see that the level of traffic that that gas station creates is really going to impact the free movement. And so those are planning issues that you have to, or the town has to look at in the future. Um, we also went through whole impact fee assessment process. I have sort of simplified that convoluted graphics that we had last time. I just wanted to, again, for everybody to better understand or refresh what we are doing. We are assessing current performance of the roads and the community, and that means how many personal trips are generated. As a part of our work, we are looking at what the estimated future demand is. Other words, can the system handle this number of future trips? Uh, we are also asking the question, what is the growth impact? In other words, what improvements needed to serve this future need, and what's the total investment for this need? And that's the answer. What will it cost? Uh, and then calculate what that cost is per trip, and then so that's the whole process we are going through. We also discussed this, and then Dennis had asked this question in one of his question, and I want to spend a couple of minutes discussing this a little bit. And Denny, you may want to chime in where the ADT issue is. But one is what the state law requires establishment of a service unit and what they call equivalent dwelling unit or EDU, and that we can, and the purpose of it is to be able to compare apples with apples. Once we set up a unit of measurements, then it is easier to compare developments with developments. Other words, then if we set up a unit of measurements for that are comparable, then we can compare a gas station with a medical facility, and in terms of the impact. So that is called service unit. That is called also EDU, and they have the typical practice is that a single family home is one EDU or one service unit, and also in contrast with that, a 1,000 square feet of commercial development, and the commercial includes industrial, all kinds of non-residential development. 1,000 square feet of non-residential development is also considered one service unit. And so we will, what Denny will do is determine the traffic generated by these service units based on his studies and based on national guidelines and national trends. Denny, you want to talk about the time periods that you will do? Denny?
Yep. Okay. The reference that is used nationally is the Institution of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Guide. This is a document that has been compiled. It's in its 10th edition now, and it is continually ongoing with updating data and updating land uses. But for a wide variety of land uses, it has data points of actual developments, actual subdivisions, actual car washes, actual restaurants, that type of thing, and how many trips were generated in and out of those developments in the peak period in the afternoon from 4 to 6, and in the morning from 7 until 9, and then all day. And from all of these data points, they have developed a methodology for predicting, based on the size of the restaurant or the gas station or whatever, how many trips would be generated. And those are divided by the trips in and the trips out, as well as what trips would be expected in the morning peak, in the afternoon peak, and all day. Now, from our work on the last time we did this and all of my studies up in northern Indiana, the peak hour for you guys is going to be in the afternoon. The morning is not quite as high, and so that's going to be the peak hour that we'll be looking at. In the last study, we looked at both of them, and in order to help reduce the cost for the update, we decided just to look at the critical hour and not the morning critical hour and the afternoon critical hour both. I think that pretty much summarizes it. Anybody have a question?
I want to make sure everybody understands the service unit, because we're going to use it in following this initial recap. I'm going to make sure that if you have any questions, the concept.
This is Dennis. I
Yeah.
do have a question. you say non-residential, you mentioned commercial and industrial. Does that also apply to government? For example, a federal building that moves in or a school?
Yes, that
Thank
is
you.
an office, and that would qualify as a commercial.
I
And if
also,
there are
Joan, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, and if there are multifamily units, so a duplex, if you will, is counted as 2 housing units?
Yes, good question.
Okay.
We're actually going to talk about it, and residential. All residential units are residential, but in when Denny does his calculations, the town has, and we'll get to it in more details later. Uh, the town has 3 different residential types: R1, R2, R3, and R1 is the single family, uh, and R2 is also single family, but with the smaller lot sizes, and R3 is multifamily. And so, yes, there will be different, the analysis, the traffic analysis will be for different types of housing units that are prevalent in the community.
Tagi,
Yes.
what about different commercial types? For instance, right now, the 1,000 square foot of non-residential is fairly generic, but there's a huge difference in traffic generated by a gas station versus an office building. How is that compensated for?
Good question, and that's why I'm glad. Please ask these questions because we're going to use them in. We're going to use the service unit concept later on. Um, Denny referred to ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers. They have come up with different types of uses that are prevalent, and we are talking about like 700 different types of uses. Um, from not only grocery store, but let's say for restaurant, that's the easiest one. They probably have 8, 10 types of restaurant. Each one gets a code. Each one gets an estimate of traffic generated per 1,000 square foot of uh, space. And so we are not using 1,000 square foot commercial just by itself. It will be the other factors, the type of use factor will also be used in determining what that impact or what that traffic generated uh, will be. Let me, I know last time we sort of showed a slide that showed a single family residential where I think had uh, 9 trips per day, and a medical facility, 15,000 square feet had 15 trips per 1,000 square feet, and a gas station had like 167 trips per 1,000 square feet. So those number of trips, based on the land use, will be factored in the final analysis. Did I answer your question, Donna? I know it is difficult.
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Now, so we're going to get today now. What we're going to do for today. We went through recap. Is everybody, I want to make sure that if there is any questions about what we did in the recap, I'll be happy to answer it. Otherwise, we're going to basically move on to the existing condition assessment. Okay, let's move on. Let me go. As a part of this condition assessment, we're going to discuss 4 different items. We're going to look at population. We are looking at the housing conditions. We are looking at the land use character. And the last but not the least is the transportation assessment. The top 3 we're going to discuss today. Transportation analysis will be discussed our next meeting. Our next meeting, we are going to focus primarily on the transportation. So, just want to bring in Danny in. Let's get the transportation out of the way. And this is what we're going to talk about in our next meeting, consisting of these 7 different items. And mind to go through them, or do you want me to do it?
No, it's okay. I'll go through real quickly. The first step is to determine. We look at things on the basis of the total traffic for the day, and that's called existing daily traffic, or ADT. And then we look at the peak hour traffic, and this will be the afternoon peak, and that's PHT. When we look at the conditions at each intersection, for instance, we'll look at the volumes making each movement and whether or not the intersection is controlled by a 2-way stop, a 4-way stop, or a traffic signal. And there are analysis methodologies that we follow, which are national, that have been developed, my gosh, since 1956 is when they originally started to develop these methodologies, and they have refined them continuously since then. And these are put out by the Federal Highway Administration, so it's a national type of analysis and methodology. From that methodology, we decided to describe how the intersection works in terms of a level of service. And that level of service is a grade letter, A through F. And just like in school, A means that things are just peachy. We're just moving right through and nobody's got any big delays and it works really well. And then it goes progressively worse than that to F, where everybody's sitting around. Maybe it takes you 2 or 3 cycles for the signal to get through. Maybe you have to wait on a long, long line at a 4-way stop to get through. Those types of conditions, which would be indicative of a level of service F. So there's methodologies that exist out there, and we'll talk about those a bit more in detail at the next meeting. And then the third point is that we'll need to establish or reestablish a community preferred level of service that we'll consider as our minimum level of service. And beyond anything that is lower than that level of service, we will look at ways to make improvements to bring the facility up to that minimum level of service. The fourth point is we're going to be looking at these conditions out into the future at 10 years. And so that'll be our time horizon. And point 5 is once we determine what improvements we're going to do, then we'll develop the cost for those improvements. And that'll include right-of-way cost, engineering cost, and construction cost. And then 6 is the real fun part, and that's where we start assigning the portions of these costs to the development. And then we come up finally with a cost per trip. So that's kind of an overview, and all of this stuff will be gone through in great detail in probably the next 3 to 4 meetings. So that's why Tagi wants to cover the other stuff first, and the other stuff that he'll cover following when I shut up is the basis for all of my analysis that follows. And so it's real important that you understand and agree with how he's setting up the development and what his assumptions are. And so that because that greatly impacts how I distribute the traffic into the network. And so with that, I'll ask if there's any questions. And again, this is just kind of a highlight of what's to come, a preview, not necessarily intent to be a full explanation of any of these things.
This is Dennis. I do have a question, or at least a request. Number 3, establish a preferred level of service. Obviously, as a citizen, I'd love to see level A all over. So I ask, why would I want anything less than a level A? I'm sure you're going to tell me there's budgetary concerns and other such issues. But when you do make your presentation, can you emphasize how you select a level of service expected?
Yes.
Good question, Dennis.
And this is Donna. I also have a question on number 4. How is that 10 years determined? Is that by law or experience or whatever?
It's primarily determined by state statute requirements.
Okay.
A 10-year horizon, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Donna, I would gather that we have a 10-year comprehensive plan, so it kind of goes hand in hand with that idea.
Makes sense.
Any other questions? Not? Okay, I'm going to move on. Population. This is number 1 in our items that I initially said. Before we get to discuss these, let me provide some sort of background information. And Dennis had asked about these. Again, Dennis, thank you for taking time and reading it and trying to understand it. For our source of information, we use Census Bureau for a lot of this demographic information that you see. Census Bureau issues 2 types of data, population data. One is a population estimate that they issue on an annual basis, typically in July. So we should be seeing one coming up shortly. And this is annual estimate of the population for whole country, all different communities. And it is only population estimate. It's nothing else that they issue. So what you see in our tables as what I have called 2018 estimate is that Census Bureau reports that was issued in 2019 for 2018. That's the latest number that we have for population estimate. In other words, Census Bureau estimate that population of the town in 2018 is about 18,047 people. And so that's one set of information that we are using. The other set of information, it comes from what is called American Communities Survey, or ACS. That's a 5-year rolling data that they issue and update on a regular basis. The last update that they made was in 2018, and that is not just limited to population. It includes housing, it includes employment, it includes variety of types of other information, family sizes, household sizes, land ownership or housing ownership. All of the data that is typically shown on a 10-year basis is included in these updates. So the updates are a 5-year averages, and I want to make sure that you understand this. When I am looking at 2018 population 16,839, that is not a population of 2018. That's a population of 5-year average of 2018 to 2013. So it's tend to be a little bit smaller. So that's the difference between the two numbers, and that's where we what we have to use. The reason we use ACS data because it provides us with other information, housing data, other population data. So we use that and we can compare apples with apples. And population estimate is just based on population, and we put it in there so for you to basically put it in the context of where the town is going. Do you have any questions on this? Particularly, Dennis, you had asked. Did I answer your question?
I heard every word. I'm still not sure I understand it. I won't take up time today, but what you're telling me is you got two numbers for 2018. You're going to pick and choose. For the average, you show the average growth of 2.7, which I believe includes the 2018 estimate, not the 2018. Or at least you don't say what the average includes. I can calculate it, I guess.
Yeah,
but these numbers, percentage-wise, there's a big difference between those numbers.
Right.
And it's going to affect, as we move forward and build on these bases, it's going to start affecting what we do. So
yeah,
I will.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The 2.7% is the average between 2018 regular number and 2010. Other words, 16,000 and 14,000. That's the average we have used. So we want to make sure that we are comparing apples with apples.
Well, since 2018 has got such a difference, one can make the same assumption about 2010. I know at some point you start putting stakes in the ground, but this is like Jello.
Yeah, 2010 is a decennial number. Those are fixed numbers. Those are based on the census.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Okay, great. So what we are seeing in terms of the population, the growth of between 2010 and 2018, the population of the town did grow by about 22%, and during that period, but the majority of the growth happened in 2000 to 2010. And this is not that to indicate that the growth in the town is declining. No, it is just the numbers are increasing, and so that percentage naturally will decline. But it is on the average for the town for the last 8-10 years. It ranges anywhere from 2 to 3% population growth. And we have, I think, Dennis, you had also mentioned something about the county and why is it so low? The county is actually losing population. That 152 that you see is, again, the difference between 2018 and 2010. And that's a loss of population, and the town is actually growing. Towns are actually put in more population in the county, but the county as a whole continues to lose population. We have, using this 18,000 as a population estimate, we think that is more reflective of, for the population, as the actual number for that year. So we're using that conservative sort of measure of 2.7% to project forward what the population of the town will be. Again, we are not playing with numbers here. We are actually using what is the estimate and using what the average population growth has been to project in a conservative way what the future population of the town will be. And based on this projection, based on this analysis, we think that the population of the town today should be around 18,846, and it will go up to 21,854 in the next 10 years. And this reflects, again, about 400 to 500, 400 to 450 people annually. And I will discuss it a little bit more when we get to the housing units. But that's sort of the average growth for the town.
That means that you're using the 2018 estimate. And 2020, you're showing 400 people, and yet you're showing 600. It just doesn't make sense, Tagi. I'll accept your numbers, but I don't understand them.
I don't want to take everybody's time. I'll be happy to, if you want to call me, I can bring out our spreadsheet and either go over the phone with you or send you a little bit more detailed information.
I appreciate that, yes.
Yeah, this is basically the common practice that in short-term sort of projection, and it reflects. We have seen projects that we have done in the past. This sort of methodology is relatively accurate with the reality of what goes on there. A good example of it is when we look at the 5 years ago in St. John, what it was and what it is today. Based on these Census Bureau's projections, we are roughly in the ballpark.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, that's the population. I want you to sort of remember that we are looking at 400 to 500 population increases annually, and that's where we are. In terms of the housing units, I want to go back to that ACS number, and this is a good example for us trying to compare apples with apples. All of this data is the ACS data, and which is different than that population estimate data. We have a total of 5,800 units of housing based on 2018 numbers, and 98% of the homes are occupied. 94% or not close to 95% are owner occupied, and about 3% are renter occupied. There's a few houses that are classified as vacant housing, These are basically the homes that are either waiting to be sold or maybe finished construction but haven't been fully finished. But the 5,800 is important for you to remember. Um, from these number of housing, I think when we look at the housing growth from 2000 to 2018 is during the first decade, we had about 2,000 housing unit. That means or meant about 70% increase in the number of housing unit. And for the last decade, that is another 1,000 units of housing has been built, and that sort of describes about 20% increase in the total number of housing units. For the last 2 decades, basically, we have the number of housing units have doubled, and from 2,800 to 5,800. Um, we know this is a good example of using the ACS data versus the estimate, and that's what is important for us to compare apples with apples. You see that in the town population estimates, we are using the ACS data, which is 16,000, and versus the ACS data for households, which is 5,684 total households, and it shows the household sizes. Um, Joan asked initially about the different types of housing. You can see that for single family homes, the average household size is 2.96, and the 2 to 4 unit uh, structures have a relatively a larger household size, and a multi-family units. There isn't that many of them, but it is it's much smaller. When Denny will be doing his analysis, these household numbers come to play, and you will see that he will probably have a different trip rates uh, for these different types of housing units, uh, and for the town. I want everybody to understand that, because Denny is going to use these numbers, and and and, uh, and so this is based on the population and all of the occupied households in the town. Um,
Sorry,
Yeah.
Tardy. Um, uh, on those population figures, didn't you say that those were the ACS population figures?
yes.
Yet, unless I misunderstood your explanation, it's actually the annual estimate, because it's only the 16,828. The ACS number, wasn't that the higher number, the 18,047?
No. Well, the ACS is a 16,828.
Yeah, there on that.
Yeah, we have 2018 ACS 16,839. This is a little bit just uh, probably in the system is rounding it from 29 to 28. It's the same number.
I must have misunderstood what you said in the first population trend slide, though.
Donna, I thought he said, and he can confirm, but I thought he said the 18,047 that's labeled 2018 estimate, that was the number that was obtained from the Census Bureau. And the number that's just 2018,000, that one was the ACS data.
Right. Now go forward to the slide that you were on. The slide that had the population estimates on it.
This one?
Yes. Okay.
Or this one?
Well, they're both using the same number. No, not that one. Go forward. Because that's what I'm comparing it to. So you're using the ACS, which is the smaller number. Yeah, see, that's what I don't get. The ACS number is the 16,000 number, isn't it?
Right. Right. These are the population estimate numbers.
Okay.
The slide that we're looking at right now.
I thought you had said they were the ACS numbers, but okay.
No, the ACS number is this one. The last row shows 2018 estimate. The last row shows 2018 estimate, but the 2018 regular ACS is 16,839.
Okay, so you're using the estimates, not the ACS on the later slides.
No, we are using this number. We are using the 839 number.
16,839? Okay.
That's it. Yeah, for this slide, you can see it is 828. These are different estimates, but it is close. That's very close. But
yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about mincing numbers. I'm worried about which ones we're using that are 12.
We're using ACS.
Yeah.
For our analysis, we are using ACS.
Okay. It might help if you put your source on the charts.
I was just gonna mention it. Yeah, the report will have all of these sources identified. Dennis had also asked, and I should have mentioned that. Well, I thought I did. All of these, as I mentioned earlier, all of these data come from either ACS or
The census.
census estimates, and they will be fully sourced in the final report.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay, let's discuss these, and I want to feel free to contribute. This is really important. Again, Dennis had made some comments on these. We have collected this data from the town, and these are actual construction permit data. And one of the things that you will notice, after 2013, roughly, the housing construction sort of moved further. And we think, and when you go back before that, during the financial crisis, it was naturally the housing was impacted, and that is also reflected in the number of permits issued uh, in by the town. Somewhere around 2015, 2016, really the town took off again, and then that is so we can see it that it went up to over 316 2017 permits issued, and in 2020 all the way to May we had 96 permits issued, and I don't know what that number is today, but we had to stop it in May, basically to continue making our analysis. You look at the last decade, we have had about 2,278 housing permits issued and assumed constructed. And that average is about 215 units uh, per year for the decade. And uh, when you look at the averages, if we break it up between 2010 and 2015, it is the averages is 183, and from 2015 to 2020, the average is about 266. For the whole decade, the average is about 215 housing units. Now, one could argue, uh, and uh, and and we really this is now with the COVID-19 coming along, we don't know what that future looks like, and but one could argue that the future could be on based on the averages that we are seeing for the last 10 years, or would be based on the averages that we have seen for the last 3 years. And that's what I do want to get your input. What we have assumed, and in later slides that I will discuss, we have used this somewhere around 215 to 230 units as a sort of average number of housing units expected to be built for the next 10 years. And that has been somewhat influenced by the COVID-19. And that's, I hope I'm wrong, but we are taking a little bit more cautious approach to project future growth and development. Another item is looking at the number of building permit for commercial uses over the last 10 years or 12 years. We have somewhere around 3 construction permits every year, and we have looked at those commercial uses in terms of the area that they are, the size of those developments, and it is most of them are relatively small. In actually one case that goes back to earlier 2011, 2012, started on that time, has actually gone down in terms of the total development, commercial development, from somewhere around 250,000 square feet. This is the Boyers development. And to 4 years ago, which was about 160,000 square feet. And today, and we have used it for this analysis, that development has been reduced to about 100,000 square feet. And so we think that a sort of more conservative approach would be would be prudent for us to move forward. I'm going to get to this part later on. I just wanted to warm you up. Let me get through these other slides just to give you a little bit more background information. I think we can have a fairly, hopefully, lively conversations at the end. In terms of labor force, more than 80% of the residents are actively participating in the labor force, and that's important. And as you know, in contrast with the state as a whole, and and if you want to contrast that with the Lake County, that number is almost double. And Also in terms of employment, uh, most of the people are highly professional and high income families, and that's reflected in these data from ACS. And One thing that is, again, it's a good issue for you to remember that a large number of people use cars to travel, and the average travel time or commute time is about 37 minutes, and this is for the county as a whole is 28 minutes, and in Indiana it is 22 minutes. This is where I initially talked about the comprehensive planning approach, and it does have planning implications for alternative transportation modes, and this is certainly reflected in these numbers. Um, my apologies for this slides. I received a comment that that's not legible. I hope it is legible now, but again, it is. It shows these are again coming in from uh, a uh, a different source, and it is the mean travel time in the region is about 32 minutes, and and again that's in contrast with this with the town, which is has a 37-minute travel time. Um, I had received a couple of requests for these maps not being legible in in your handout. I can send these again out. These are coming from the town documents. We do not have a larger version of this. We do have a GIS that Jay has worked on to produce all of the land use data, but this map particularly comes from the town's comprehensive plan, and we have used this as a part of our analysis, as well as using the zoning map or the zoning code for our analysis. These two documents basically have been used to develop the next slides that we go through.
And Tony, if I
Yes.
may, if I may comment, I believe those maps are hanging up on the walls of the planning department. At least one of them is.
They're available online too.
Yeah, but they're not that much more legible online. I've looked at them in the past, but I'm wondering if, well, I don't know that the town has them available for distribution, is what I'm about to say. That would be the best thing, is to get your hands on the paper copies. But if you, I don't know if that's a possibility. Whatever, we'll find that out. But if you really want to take a look at them, they are up on the walls of the planning department.
Yeah, it is. So this is what we have. Again, this comes from online sources. For our sources, we actually use GIS, which is provided by the
I
town.
believe Donna, I think I bought one for $5 like last year.
Oh, from the town.
Yes, ma'am. Go to the planning department, and I think they may be still selling them. I don't know if they have any copies left, but I have a big one.
Okay, well, that's worth looking into. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the one they have hanging on the wall. I have one at home.
Okay, great.
Well, the map you're currently looking at is a zoning map. I'm the one who
Is that
made it.
what it is?
The
Okay.
one that Brian's talking about is a street guide. The street guides are for sale in the clerk's office for $5 a
There you
piece.
go.
And there's actually a new one out that has a separate index.
They're quite nice to have around, for discussions like this. If you want to have one right on your lap, I encourage you to get one.
These
Yeah.
maps are pretty good. I think if you use this version that we have, you can easily zoom in there and you can make it a little bit better legible. And again, this is online. But for our purpose, for our analysis, we have used GIS data. Those are much more accurate GIS maps that were provided to us by Jason. Okay, so we looked at what is in the town, what is currently in the town, and based on the GIS data, and we have, this is basically shows the inventory of different land uses in the town, and for residential, commercials, and industrial, public open space, and others. Others include the wetlands and floodplains, rivers, and those types of things. Open space in the town is perhaps a misnomer. The town has a lot of vacant land zoned as open space. So these are future developable land, but they are zoned currently as open space.
Doggy,
Yes,
this land use inventory, is that only the land identified in the previous map? It doesn't include all of the non-incorporated areas?
no, it is just the town. What is within the town boundaries?
So anything that gets annexed would be added to this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What you see here is, again, you will see, I think one notable item is that 65% of the town is currently used for residential purposes. And 9% is for commercial purposes. Most of the commercial uses are primarily along the two corridors, and that's where they are. Um, this this is one of those items that again Dennis asked for it, and we thought, well, let's put it in, and so you understand the context of where we are or where the town has been. Um, you we looked at the last 5 years annexations in the town, and the town has annexed about 254 acres for the last 5 years, and these have sort of, as they have come in, typically when they're annexed for a specific purpose, and Jay has put this table together, the second table, and shows what these annexations, uh, what these newly annexed area were used for, and you can see about a quarter of them were zoned for R1 single family, and a large portion of it has been R2 PUD, which allows the developers to have a mix of type of units in those, and only about 15 acres of it is commercially zoned. So I think uh, perhaps for you to better understand or put this annexation in the context of things, I know we're going to get to it later, is to look at, you recall the service units that we talked about, the EDUs. What do these annexed lands represent? And so for the last 5 years, the annexed areas have created about 636 units of service units or EDUs. And so that is, I think, important to know. And out of the different areas that has been annexed,
Tagi, this is Craig. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you go back to the map that showed the future annexation area?
There is no map for future annexation area.
What was there was a utility area, or whatever. The one that showed the expansion south towards Cedar Lake. There's a couple slides back.
That's
just
the area
just before
here.
zoning. Okay, land use future development. Okay, so how does that, okay, on that map, where it talks about phase 1 and phase 2, that's future growth of St. John, essentially annexation eventually. How does that factor into this study again?
The corporate, by the state statute, we cannot go beyond the corporate boundaries
Correct.
of the town.
Correct.
In our analysis, we can. That's why I brought in that's what has been annexed for the last 5 years. We can take into consideration in sort of future traffic generations from these future annexation areas. And that is something we can do. But that is on the traffic side. On the land use side, we cannot assume that certain land will be annexed by the town because we don't, number one, we don't know where it is. And and what that magnitude is in terms of the sizes.
So does the impact zone, is it static, or does it change as land is annexed into the city?
It does not change good question. It is, I'm glad you brought it up. It is our understanding, and it is, I think, generally agreed upon principle, that as the land is annexed, the provisions of the impact fee would apply to these annexed areas as well.
Meaning that the impact zone would extend.
Right.
But as long as that's the way that the enabling ordinance is written.
Well, enabling ordinance typically does state that, the boundaries are, the zone improvement plan is as such, and it will be adjusted as the lands are annexed.
Okay, I just wanted to ask about that. I know that we can't factor the land use calculations in, but I wanted to ask when it comes to, because you were talking about future development, so I thought it was an appropriate time to ask. Even though we can't necessarily calculate those areas we can't include those areas in the calculation. We can capture fees from those areas as they develop, as they're annexed into the town.
That's correct.
Okay, that was the crux of my question. So, okay, thank you.
And I want to also sort of add a little bit or tweak a little bit your comments about not considering future developments. I believe Denny is very much in tune with those futures in his analysis, with those potential future traffics or trips. And he does consider those as a part of his analysis. You want to confirm that, Denny?
Wait, I'm sorry. What, can you say that again?
We have accounted for development that we know about that is occurring outside of the town's boundary. And I think as Tagi will continue going on, we will determine an absorption rate or a rate of projected number of residential and commercial units that we are predicting will occur. And to a certain extent, whether those occur in an annexed area or future annexed area or in an existing area, it will have some incremental impact. But it's kind of like a Ouija board. You can't predict everything right down to the gnat's butt. So it's really important that we agree upon a future absorption rate of residential units and of commercial units. And then the commercial, by and large, is going to probably be focused in the 231 and the 41 corridors, with exception of over by Greystone, over at Calumet and 109th in that area. And then the residential, we may miss the mark from the standpoint of that all might not be within the town boundaries. Some of it may come from the south of the present town, but those people are going to, by and large, impact US 41 and not your other arterials. So I think that the analysis provides a pretty good approximation for the impacts of future development, but it all really hinges on what follows in Tagi's discussion about how much we're going to project we will absorb in dwelling units and residential units and in commercial. Is everybody happy with this explanation?
So it's more about an absorption rate rather than a build out analysis.
Yes, because if when Taki and I were talking about this, he said, well, I'm projecting part of the development that will occur in the next 5 years, we will come from subdivisions that we don't know about. And I said, well, how am I going to distinguish that? And what we decided to do is that we would use the existing subdivisions and increase them artificially to make up for those unknowns in the future. And probably by and large, those will balance out over time. Now, another thing to think about is, I believe, Taki, every 5 years, you're supposed to update this.
That's
so
correct.
that allows you to then back up and recalibrate your assumptions and then go forward from there.
Did we answer everybody's question?
I think, yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
Kind of.
I think it's, I'm not sure that I'm clear on when can we use future growth that is outside of the current St. John city limits? Are we going to use that estimated growth that's happening outside the city's current limits in the transportation study and analysis that's being done? Because I think I heard two things. In some analysis it can be used, and other analysis that cannot be used.
You want to talk about, I think Danny can answer your question. There is that you want to talk about some of the regional stuff, you will be.
Okay. Again, what we're talking about is Taki has come up with an absorption rate. Let's just talk residential. Taki has come up with a number of dwelling units that will likely be built each year or over a 5-year period. And we know where existing subdivisions are that have been approved. And what we don't know is there will be other subdivisions, maybe inside town, maybe outside of town, that will become annexed in. And so how we've accommodated that is that we have increased the percent of the existing platted subdivisions to compensate for those unknown areas. Now, again, most of your annexation is going to occur south, and that may affect 109th a little bit, but it may will primarily impact US 41. And US 41 is not a corridor that you'll use this impact fee to make improvements with, because it's under NDOT's jurisdiction, not under the town's jurisdiction. So I think we have found a way to accommodate this growth from future annexed areas. Not exactly, but we don't have a crystal ball to exactly say where that growth will appear. But I believe that if you agree with it all goes back to the absorption rate. If you agree with that absorption rate, then that's how we can accommodate this.
And what is the absorption rate that we're currently looking at again?
I don't think we've got to that yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so I didn't miss that.
No. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I want to make sure that again, I am back into recent annexation slide that we put together. I want to stress this, that out of these 9 parcels that have been annexed, 8 of them, those are that have a sort of red corner marked on them, and those are all within the planned development or pending developments currently, and they have been put into the overall calculations, and so they're accounted for. But I think it is important for you also to note the magnitude of the impact of this, the annexed area for the last 5 years, the 636, and that is if we assume the same amount is annexed next 5 years and the trend continues, that's the sort of the magnitude of number of units that we are looking at potentially. And what Denny was saying was he is partially accounting for some of those. Okay, so these are all background. Now we are going to get into what is the future. What's where we call the capacity analysis, and for us to determine what the future stands for is we are looking at three different possible sources. One is what is available vacant land. We have called that as developable land. And these are the currently vacant land. These could be just a federal land or could be farmed, but they are vacant land. There is a second set of potential development that is coming from what we have called a planned development. This include either the subdivisions that have been recently approved or subdivision that the town is aware of that developers have talked to the town and there is maybe pending. Some of them maybe in the plan commission on the plan commission agenda. So that's a second set of potential future developments. And the third set of future developments could come from available vacant subdivision lots. These are available lots from existing subdivisions that could be developed during the next 10 years. So these are three different sets of development potentials for the town. And I'm going to go through each and discuss it. These are developable lands in the town, and this map shows all of the vacant lands that are there that could be developed in the future. And what we have done and is look at these parcels and then turn them using the comprehensive plan, using the zoning. We have identified what these parcels of land are either zoned for or planned to be zoned for. And we have also assumed that most of the open space most of the land that is currently zoned as open space, we think it is reasonable to assume that most of this land, especially in light of the fact where they're located, will be used for residential purposes. And so we have assigned residential designation to these open space currently zoned or available open space land. So for 42 parcels that we have in the town that are developable land, 22 of them are residential, 20 parcels are commercial. And we have reviewed each one of these parcels and adjusted the acreages where it was necessary, because many of these parcels are also either wetlands or they're in floodplain or there are some other conditions that may or may not be allowed to be developed. So we have adjusted those on a case-by-case basis. And when we look at these, using the zoning requirements, we can place a potential number of units that could be developed based for each one of these parcels. A good example is R1. We have a total land of 154 acres. We think in this 154 acres, about 281 units of housing can be developed. And that is roughly about 2.2 units per acres. And that is allowed by the zoning, and that's where the total number of service unit comes from. I want everybody to understand this because we're going to use the same sort of analysis or the same table for other types of potential development. Does everybody understand this? So we are using zoning, permitted zoning density for each category of the zoning to use and to develop the total number of potential service units or development units. Does everybody understand this? Are we
What?
clear?
Okay.
So Tagi, does the same relationship of acreage per EDU, does that equate back to the same ratios as 2 slides back?
2 slides back, I believe
Right.
that, yes. For the annexation areas, yes.
Because, yeah.
Taki, doesn't the district number R1, R2, etc. goes up, the density increases. So
Yes.
how does the lower density classification result in more development units?
The R1, I'm not sure if I understand your question. R1 requires a higher square foot per lot than R2.
Right, but you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I'm looking at this table, I'm seeing, okay, R1, developable acreage, 154 acres, development units based on that of 281.
Yeah.
And then R2, 108 available acres or developable acres, and 249. Why is that? Why is the more dense zoning classification resulting in fewer units? Because it's less acres?
It's not pure, 108 acres versus 154.
Okay, so it's purely because there are more developable acres.
Right. And we have looked at these on a case-by-case basis.
And this is how land is currently zoned within the town's limits.
Right. Based on those parcels that we identified. And a case-by-case
and you've taken out the undevelopable portions of those.
Undevelopable portion. Also, each case we have made assumptions or we have adjusted for roads. If it is on a corner lot that has a road in there, that parcel of land may not need as much road to be taken out.
Right. No, I think I understand now. It has to do with the fact that there's more R1 land available.
Right.
Okay. At first, when I saw those developable units, it was confusing, but it's because there are fewer acres available of R2 as compared to R1. Okay. No, I understand it now. At first, I wasn't understanding that. Okay. Thanks.
Does everybody understand what we have done here? I take it everybody understands it. I'm going to move on. So keep that in mind. We're going to use these numbers at the following slide. So we have a certain number of developable land with acreages and what those developable land could generate in terms of service units. Now, the second set of development potential comes from these planned development. These are subdivisions that are in the pipeline, or somebody has talked about it, and the town has had some discussions about them, and with the future developers. And the difference in these is that a lot of times these are on the preliminary stage, and but we do know a little bit more about the development than the previous slide. And so for that reason, when you look at these, we can see that out of the 671 acres of land that we have that are either planned or on a pending, we are getting about 1,500 units of development. But a lot of these units of development are actually either actual or proposed by these developers. And so it is a little bit stronger in terms of future potentials for these sites because we have some idea what the developers want to do with that land. So we have 671 acres of planned developments, and these 671 acres are expected to generate about 1,515 service units. Any questions? Did I lose everybody?
Taggy,
Did I lose everybody or not?
you have, you have to give us time to get to our mics and unmute them.
My apologies. I'm trying to rush it so we don't get to the noon hour.
Yes, I understand. But I have a question on, so this is showing 671 units. The slide before, which was more of a
671 acres.
Yeah, acres. I'm sorry, acres. And the slide before, which was more of a ballpark, is over 909 acres.
Right.
So you're saying, though, I just want to capture what your thought is on this, that for the purposes of this impact study, we probably would rather use the 671? Is that what you're saying?
No. These are two different potentials for future development.
Okay. One's more firm than the other, correct?
That's correct. That is correct. Yes.
All right. Okay. Let's continue.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to get to the perhaps the easiest one. We went from developable land to planned development. Now we are getting to the existing lots. These are available lots, different subdivisions in the town that we have identified, and we have gone through these, and to the accuracy of these numbers are to basically to less than 5 lots. We may have missed, other words, 1 or 2 lots here and there, but we have made efforts to identify any lots that is available for development in the town. That includes not only GIS data, not only county data, as well as Jay directly calling developers for subdivisions and verifying some of these numbers. Okay, so when we do this, this is what we get. In the town, a total of, as of, Jay, when was the last time you checked on these? It will be as of May. Is that right, Jay?
I believe these would have been April was the latest we had information on it.
Yeah, okay. Whenever we stopped our survey, at that time, we had 837 lots available for development. These are again lots within the existing and approved subdivision within the town. You will notice that there is no acreage on these, and that is the reason for it is these are the actual lots, regardless of the lot size. Any comments on this? Does everybody understand this? Okay. Now, this table shows the total number of acres, the total number of service units, if we put all these three categories together. So we have vacant land. We said we have 661 acres. We have planned development. We said that we have about 644 acres, and we also said we have available lots, 837. Is that right? If we add for residential purposes, I'm looking at these top sort of area. If we put all of these together, we get about 3,449 service units. Does everybody understand this? We basically put the three categories together for residential development. We do the same thing for commercial. We get 3,558 units, service units. And I know Dennis had a question about this, and I will describe it. For industrial, the same situation. Now, if we put all of the service units from residential, from commercial, from industrial, we get 8,420 total service units for the town. Do I have everybody? I take the silence is yes. I'm going to move on. Is that right? Or you want me to stay on it? Okay. So potential future development in St. John will be based on the last table. Residential units 3,449, commercial development 3,558, industrial development 1,413. Service unit. These are service units. These are the EDUs that we talked about. Out of all of these, we have that includes all of those planned commercial activities, which we have it's about 27 acres and the planned commercial activities that is right now in the pipeline generate about 176 units. The total I mentioned that total service units 8420. I want to put this in the context because Dennis had asked for it, and he had asked what does the 3,558 service unit mean in real development. So we have 4 developments right now, currently. And those 4 developments that are being planned, Jay, do you remember what those 4 developments are quickly?
So the majority of them is going to be with the Shops of 96 development on 41. The other 3, I believe, is called St. John Car Condos, which would be north of the old Aspen Cafe on 41. There's phase 2 of a strip center development further south on 41. That's part of that. And blanking off the top of my head what the 4th was, but generally all 4 of these are along 41, and the majority of them are comprised of the Shops of 96 development.
Do you have the development? Have you spoken with Rick about the development just to the north of the Shrine on 41?
No, Rick has not said anything about that to me. No.
You might want to ask Rick. I don't have the most current information. I don't want to give bad information, so you might get the most current information from Rick about a proposed development just north of the Shrine on the west side of 41.
Craig, just to let you know, we had to stop at some point because all of these had to be transferred to Denny so he can run his models.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're fixed with these numbers at this point, and those running those models cannot be sort of done continuously.
Okay, well, and that's probably fine because the
Yeah.
car condos project is likely not going to happen as in the form that it was initially going to. So maybe then that other development can make up for that. So perhaps it works out in the wash.
Okay, great. What I think what Dennis had asked was, what does 3558 service unit, commercial development service unit means? I think one point in terms of putting that number to context of what has been proposed is you can see that as 176 units of service units of development is going to be is estimated from these 4 pending developments. So the 3,500 service unit is humongous number of development. It basically reflects over 3 million square feet of commercial developments. And I want to just bring to your attention that would perhaps represent 1,000 grocery store. A typical Kmart ranges from 40,000 to 60,000 square feet. So it is tremendous amount of potential for new development if we assume it is once it is fully developed. And it is important to see these, and because it could be a wake-up call. It is known for these services or for these developments. So if you're not watching it, the town will face tremendously more issues with its traffic. nonetheless, I'm hoping I answered Dennis's sort of comments and also bring to your attention to put these numbers in the context of what has been uh, what has been done in the past. Just one slide before I mentioned about the last 5 years annexation represented 600 units of development. Now, if you have, and most of them are residential, but you have the potential of once it is fully developed, what you have right now, you're looking at potentially a 3,400 uh, service units on the residential, just on the residential alone. So, does everybody understand this? Do you have any questions about this? Okay. Um, uh, bear with me. I have 3 more slides. I'm going to recap what we have had, what we have discussed. The town has issued 2,278 new building permit for the last decade. The average of these range about 215 per year, and commercial development has been about 3 permits per year. And the one other observation that we have made based on the planned subdivision is that we have had about 1,339 units of new subdivision or new units being proposed in the planned subdivision areas. When you look at these, what is being proposed currently by the developers, that is actually lower than what the is lower density than what the zoning requirements are. So the town is approving developments that are larger in lot sizes than going actually smaller. That is sort of good news, bad news. The good news part of it is you're lowering the density of development in the town. And the sort of the bad news is that you could have had more housing units in that same land. But we are not making a judgment on that. The observation is that what currently the town approves is subdivisions that have lower density. So that's part of the trends that we I'd like you to be aware of. Uh, so when I was talking about the total development potential or capacity of the town for development, that is what the capacity is. The question here is we have a 10-year horizon. What can we do? What should we reasonably expect to do for the next 10 years? When you look at what has been built, and this assumes that no impact for the COVID, so from the COVID-19, and what has been proposed in the past, both on in terms of housing and commercial development, it is much less than what the town can has the capacity to do, and so what should we expect next 10 years? We have made certain assumptions, and to determine what that future or a 10-year horizon development will look like. We think that all of the available lots will get priority in development, and that's natural. You already have available lots, you're going to build there if you have it, rather than do a new subdivision. We think that next 10 years, planned development will be both commercial and residential. Those planned development should be complete. And we think some of the new subdivisions in vacant land or annex areas will develop, and but that is going to be limited. And we think that as a whole, the residential development is perhaps going to be around 215 to 230 on the average. And so it will add somewhere around 2,000 to 2,500, 2,300 units of new housing today in the town. Keep that in mind, that's less than what the capacity of the land is in the town, but that is what we think next 10 years that could happen. For planned commercial development, all of those 4 developments that Jay talked about, we think those will be complete. We also think that additional vacant land will be consumed for new development, but that would be limited to perhaps maximum of 30% of the total available land. When I'm talking about 30% of the total available land, I want to refer you back to that 3,000 number. In other words, there will be an additional, perhaps over the next 10 years, additional 1,000, 1,100 service units added in the commercial sector. And we think that that is actually somewhat wishful thinking, but certainly when you compare that with 170 units that is currently planned. And one of the other assumptions is the technology may not significantly change the market conditions, particularly as a result of the advent of this recent phenomenon and people working at home and developing their technologies at home. This could have the definition of work could easily change. And but we are assuming that the definition of work stays at pre-COVID-19. And we have also made an assumption that the industrial development, you only have 2 parcels and only perhaps will be done in 1 parcel because the other parcel is just very difficult, has access issues and variety of types of things. And at least in the past, it appeared that even industrial development on that parcel may not be desired by the town anyway. So these are some of sort of the underlying estimate or assumptions for us to determine what the anticipated development for the next 10 years will be. We think on the residential side, we are looking at a total of somewhere around 2,359 units of housing. That is that includes all of the available lots. That includes 50% of the planned development, and that includes also some land that is will be vacant land units, and this some land is also assumed that some of that land could come from outside the town. In other words, it will be annexed in the future, and but as a whole, what Denny called as absorption rate for the town for the next 10 years, we estimate that 2,300 units. On the commercial side, in again, we think that that would be somewhere around 1,245 units of service units, and on industrial, I mentioned one parcel perhaps will be developed, and that would be 436 units of new industrial development. If we add all of these together, we have about 4,040 service units that we anticipate for the next 10 years could be developed in the town. Now, one other item. Let me stop here before getting to the other area. Any questions about this table right now? Does everybody understand what I did or what we did?
So we're saying the total potential is the 8420 service units, and we're going to develop roughly half of them over the 10-year horizon.
Over that's yes.
Okay,
It is
so
reasonable
48%.
to assume that would be the next 10 years. We can develop that much.
Okay.
Tagi, this is Denny.
Mhm.
When we look at this, the last 3 years, we've developed somewhere in the excess of 300 dwelling units a year. Going forward, you're expecting it to be about 240 units a year. So you're being conservative on the amount of residential that will be developed compared to the last 3 years. On the flip side of that, the 1,245, when you divide that out by 10 years, that's the equivalent to a Boyer Shops on 96th every year. Is everybody comfortable with that?
No.
No. No.
No.
No,
That's the sort of the type of input we are looking for. As I said,
Yeah.
That seems pretty high. I mean, and does that compare to the trend that we've seen in terms of the amount of square footage of commercial that's developed over the past 10 years, for example?
Yeah, as I mentioned, at least what we have for past 10 years, I don't know if you were here, Craig, when I was presenting them, we have had 31 commercial permits, and when you look at that, yes, it doesn't add up to that amount. In Boyer Development, I'm pretty sure they have done a lot of market studies, and for the last 5 years, they have cut down their development by half, and so they see something in the market that is not that important. Having said that, we are going through this change, and the Amazon phenomenon is also going to impact a lot of retail development. And is that reasonable to assume that you, from particularly for commercial purposes, for planned development, we know it is going. We know for available lots, there is nothing there. And so the question here is, out of that vacant land that is there, should we assume 30% of that vacant land will be developed for commercial uses?
I have an overriding question. I recall from prior sessions that it would be highly unlikely that the town would be able to enforce the EDUs on commercial that the square space would suggest. The numbers would get very large very fast. Therefore, if you can calculate the number any which way, but at the end of the day, there will probably be waivers on it if a commercial building came in that was favorable to the town. As such, these numbers on the commercial side just seem exceedingly high. And if they're going to be used in any kind of future measurements, I think they distort the objective. But that's an opinion.
Yeah. It is high. At the same time, the town is, I know it is under pressure for development, and we basically have two commercial corridors. Most of this development is going to occur on these two commercial corridors. It is important for us not to project too much for future development, because it does have implications in terms of trip generations. The more we put in here, and Denny, feel free to chime in. The more this number is, this 4040, the more traffic generation is going to happen, or trip generation is going to happen. And a more realistic number would help in terms of that level of service that Denny was talking about, because that is also will get impacted by the number of trips that these development will generate.
Tagi, the commercial number seems highly. It seems incredibly high. When you look at how long it's taken for the entire corridor, 41 corridor, from say, like 105th, like 103rd, let's say, from 103rd up to 97th to develop, and that's taken many years to develop, and then Shops 96. Well, we all know how long that's taking. When you talk about, Denny, did you say something about 3 million square feet?
I think it was me. I mentioned that.
That's the size. That's like all the commercial development along 30 in Merrillville, around the mall.
Close, yes. That is close.
South Lake Mall. South Lake Mall is 1 million square feet.
Yes.
That's a massive amount of commercial.
Right.
When I don't know I don't know off the top of my head what the square footage of commercial that's already in St. John total is at this point. I know there's pressure, but that seems very, very excessive.
This is the challenge that we have, and I'm hoping that everybody will chime in this. Before we get to this one, I know it is late. Does everybody? I know Dennis had raised questions about the residential. does everybody accept the residential projection as reasonable projection for the next 10 years?
I think it's too low.
Dennis thinks it's too low based on the trends and the flow out of Illinois and the geographic location of our town, reinforced by the last 3 years, suggests the numbers we're using are low.
I would think that we're going to be pushing more like anywhere from 275 to 3.25 a year if the economy holds. I foresee, just like last night, the planning commission, there was another 3 subdivisions introduced, and you're talking about over 350 units that are going to be built out over the next 10 years, and that was one night worth of development.
If that is the consensus, that development will have to occur on vacant lands, because planned development, it is fixed. Available lot is fixed numbers. And so let us adjust that for perhaps a total of somewhere around that 2,700 units that on the average. I think I can adjust that, and all of that adjustment will happen in the vacant land section.
Well, the properties that were introduced last night were all on open space. They were changed and they were asking for zoning to R1 and R2. So therefore, you're looking at, adding tons of units to vacant land, which is already in the parameters of St. John.
Again, we don't know where these developments happen. For the vacant land, we have assumed a 30%, again, for the next 10 years of development. I'm going to look at and see perhaps moving that up to 40 or 50%. How would that look like? At the end of the day, we want to look at this 23 number, the total number, because that is where the market is going to dictate. So we'll look at that, and hopefully, and I will have to talk to Denny also, because he will have to do some additional work. So that is, everybody agrees with that, so we can move forward. We will adjust it, and again, we can discuss it perhaps next meeting if we have to, and depending on when that meeting is. I'd like to have the consent of the committee for us to move forward and perhaps look at that average, as Brian said, somewhere around 2,700 to 3,000 over the next 10 years.
Yeah, this is Doug. I think you're going to be closer to 300 units a year for residential, and I think your commercial is a little bit too high.
Right.
Totally agree.
I'm sorry, I lost you, Brian.
No, I totally agree with what you just said.
Okay, so we are looking at 3,000 units next 10 years. And so everybody agrees that's a consent. And so we can move on to the commercial part. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is Joan. I would agree that the residential needs to go up at least to that 300 level.
Okay, great. That's really important. Now let's talk about the commercial. The 100, I want to stress that because that's real. The 176 units of development, that is the planned development currently, which includes Boyer's development. And we are saying from the existing vacant lands, we are looking at about 5 times as much. I want you to look at the 991 units. 5 times as much over the next 10 years. And that came as a result of making an assumption that 30% of the available vacant, commercial vacant land will be developed. What is the sense of the committee in terms of that percentage or potential developments? Is 200,000, 300,000 square feet, is that something reasonable?
Tagi, this is Dennis. The COVID issue has not been kind to small businesses.
Right.
And that leads me to an unfortunate question. If you have a vacant building and you repopulate it with a new tenant, is that considered a new development?
For the impact fee purposes, as long as the use stays within the category of that use. In other words, if it was a restaurant and closes and another restaurant goes there, or a department store, another department store goes there, no, they're not subject to impact fee. But if they change that use, then they will be subject to impact fee.
Because I don't envy your task, given the uncertainty of the next 6 to 9 months and what's going to happen with some of our smaller businesses in the community. It's got to be very difficult to focus on new establishments. That's all I have.
We need your expertise here. That's you're here also to
A lot more opinion than expertise.
I was just going to chime in. It's all opinion, Tagi. We don't really have anything basically to hang our hat on.
Yeah, this COVID-19 is really impacting everything. It's very difficult to make assumptions to, at the same time, to say, the market's going to bear this. So, and we are going through such a tremendous shift in materials and the whole distributions, Amazons, and you name it, is just impacting. So, but we need to go forward. My personal thinking is that if we look at last 10 years, as Craig mentioned, and we have that data, and assume the same amount of development will occur next 10 years, I think that is a reasonable assumption, which most probably will be a fraction of what you see here.
Tagi, I would like to suggest we use your number. We're going to go forward with another set of iterations and calculations. For the time being, this is lower than what I've seen on other pages. 1,000 units, it's a lot of property, but you're talking 10 years. And I certainly don't want to downplay the potential of the economy over a 10-year period. I would say for right now, use it.
This is Denny. The impact of that commercial property is huge. And until we have a number, I can't do the analysis for the period from 5 to 10 years. I think the period for the next 5 years is much more predictable, and we can work with what we've got. But the period after that is where this 1,245 really comes into play. And so until that number is nailed down, I can't do my calculations. I can't do any of the analysis. so we can wait until next week and you all can kind of think about this maybe. But just understand that 1245 number, until that number is firmed up, I'm dead in the water as far as calculating the impacts from year 5 to 10.
Just one aspect of that, I want to stress that depending on, you see the ITE codes there, and those are all sort of listed uses that is permitted under the C2 classification of the zoning ordinance for these developments. Those will generate traffic. That traffic or trips, has cost implications. The cost implications meaning eventually is going to mean what that impact fee rate will be. And that is the risk of going or sort of overestimating the future development. In effect, you will be also overestimating the trip generations and overestimating, in effect, Denny will have to overestimate the cost and his level of service. And then you end up with charging more particularly for commercial development in the final impact fee.
So does the modeling, I don't know, the tools that you're using to do this modeling, does the modeling tool do any sort of sensitivities analysis? Or is it's a one set of assumptions and that's what gets run through the model?
What do you want to answer that?
I mean by sensitivity. No, there is a little bit of sensitivity that's done. We look at the split on the type of trips, whether they're to work, to other, to shopping. So there's some sensitivity there. But the biggest impact on this is the land use and how much of the land use. And so that's the key to the whole thing. And these commercial trips generate a lot of traffic. So I want to reinforce what Tagi is saying is that the more commercial you have, the higher the number of trips, the greater the need for improvements, the higher the total cost, and so on.
Right, but so the analysis that you run is you're putting one number in. You don't say, okay, if you don't give us back, if you are plus or minus on this commercial side, here's what that impact looks like.
No, you would have to give me the plus or minus in order for me to be able to look at, and that would, now if I have to look at more than one number, that's a whole another generation of cost and analysis.
Okay, I don't know what your models look like, so I'm not familiar with them. So I don't know if it's that's asking to move the world, or that no, we have the ability to run sensitivity analysis on your numbers. And what I'm hearing from you is that that's probably doing a range is not an option. Am I reading you correctly?
It may be an option, but there would be additional cost in the analysis associated with it. What would happen is I'd run the capacity analysis at the two different levels, the max and the min, and then for any given intersection that may or may not impact the need to step up to another lane or to provide a left turn lane or to provide a traffic signal. And so it kind of goes in incremental steps from the standpoint of first I would do the analysis of the intersection, And then that result would drive whether or not I have to add improvements.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Tagi, the commercial, does that include medical facilities, doctor's offices, expansions of hospitals?
Yeah,
Yes.
I believe there will be a lot of that here. I'm a member of an aging population. Secondly, the Avon, the Avion restaurant on the corner of 92nd, 93rd, would that have been considered a new development?
I believe it is.
So by repurposing buildings, that qualifies, or that would incur a, let me rephrase that. That is an EDU. That would, that would,
That's an EDU change, yes,
an EDU change.
yes.
I suggest you stay where you're at.
Is that a consensus? Again, we need some direction from you right now, and I think we have agreed on the residential. That's reasonable assumption. I need direction for commercial, and in effect, what we are saying here is for commercial unavailable vacant lands, we are looking at next 10 years, a little bit above 1 million square feet of commercial development to happen on the two corridors in the town. Does everybody agree to that?
And I'm sorry. So
That any of us would be comfortable agreeing to that at this moment in time. We've just spent the last 2 hours sifting through these numbers, not even sifting through these numbers, having these numbers laid out in front of us. And I personally would like time to digest this whole presentation a little bit more. There's a lot of things to consider here, not only the Amazon effect, but also we've got a brand new town council in place. We don't really have a good feel for how aggressive or not they're going to be on commercial development. The COVID, of course, is having an effect. I don't know. It's just a lot to adjust with having just had these numbers put on us. I'd like to, I mean, I know we want to get this done quickly, but we also want to do a good job at it. Not that we're going to get it right, because there's no way, to predict the future with any accuracy, but I need time to digest it.
Let's, and I think that is absolutely reasonable, and I'm glad you're asking for it. If there is a consensus, I think we can look back on these numbers in our next meeting, sort of start with these, and you will have a chance to review them more. And that's the whole purpose of us having multiple meetings, so you will have an opportunity to digest the information and make decisions. I think what I would like to do is, again, this is going to change. We also have a sort of short-term scenario of this, and this is totally going to change. And so we will, I'm not even going to bother you with this short-term anticipated development, but you have it, and we will discuss it in our next meetings. And I think the findings, we will again, we can discuss it, and let's see when we can have our next meeting, and heard Denny talking about next meeting primarily will be in transportation. I did add some item added in anticipation. What we discussed right now is to have the capacity issues discussed, but we will have that first. And when would you like to meet next? And I think I have put in for your consideration a July, was it 30th? I think.
July 30th, 10 o'clock.
Right. Yeah, since that one, if you want to meet next week, Denny's done with his, or I have Denny's presentation. If you want to meet next week, you think you're ready to meet, we can meet next week, if you like. If not, how is July 30th work for everybody?
Well, now for Denny's presentation, he doesn't need an answer from us on these numbers today, does he? I mean, he's not going to run the model between now and then. Is that correct?
What I can talk about next week is what will happen in the next 5 years. From the residential units talking, I need to get together and see what that impacts for the next 5 years. But I can run those calculations, I think, and still be ready for a meeting next week on Thursday, and be able to talk about the next 5 years and what looks like it'll happen in that time period. What the commercial development total will impact will be the next 10 years, and that'll be huge.
So let me get a feel from the rest of the group, from Dennis and Joan and Vince, or is it Doug? Doug, I'm sorry. Are you comfortable with these numbers right now? Do you want to digest them some more? Do you want to have a meeting together to throw some ideas back and forth? What are your feelings?
This is Dennis. Go ahead, Joan.
Thought would be is that if I would like to digest the numbers and get some sort of a, like, what does that commercial number mean? I think Craig was saying, like, giving us comparisons to, that's the size of South Lake Mall that we're talking about developing, right? I think I need a little bit more time to digest it, but what I would like to do is, if we could meet next week, I'd like to keep kind of the momentum going rather than having, weeks in between meetings. I'd rather kind of, meet weekly, and that would be fine.
Does that mean you'd like to have more of a working meeting next week rather than a presentation?
No, I would be okay with the transportation meeting next Thursday. I think maybe between now and next Thursday, if we could do somewhat of a working session, that would be helpful as well. But I don't know how other folks feel about meetings in the next 5 days.
I'm fine with that. I don't know what everybody else's schedule is like at the moment. What about you other participants? What are your feelings?
This is Doug. I'd just like to do a meeting next Thursday. Is fine with me. And transportation. I mean, we could discuss for a little bit in the beginning of the meeting as far as the numbers go, but then proceed with the transportation part for the first 5 years for the residential part.
This is Dennis. I would appreciate an accelerated schedule. So next Thursday is fine for me. But I would like to add, we've got a number of qualified individuals here who have made a presentation. And I thought about it here for the last 45 minutes. My mind is pretty well made up. The experts came in, they gave us some guidance. There is so much uncertainty that on the one side, we may be very, very high because nobody may come to town. On the other hand, we may have so much innovation as a result of all of this change that we may find ourselves surprised on the upside. So I'm willing to accept their decision. I doubt if any more thought in my mind will change. I think the pros have demonstrated their ability, their willingness to adjust for what we thought was low on the homestead side. But on the commercial side, those are the trips. That is what's going to influence the whole study. And any reduction in that number is going to reduce the number of trips, which reduces the impact of what we're trying to achieve. So that's where I'm at.
I think also if you have more residents coming to town and living here, you're going to demand more commercial. So in 10 years, I think, we're going to be putting up more and more commercial buildings than you think.
Well, yeah, that's a possibility. There's no doubt about that. Right now, I don't want to make a decision on these numbers today. I get the sense that we're kind of split on that one way or the other. I have no problem with making the decision next week, but it's a lot has been thrown at us today. And it's been difficult to compare numbers back and forth between slides since we're not sitting here with full paper slides in front of us. And that would be something, Tagi, I would request having individual slides per sheet of paper, because even printing out what you have sent us with 4 slides on a sheet of paper, it's just impossible to read these little numbers.
Mm-hmm. It's PDF. Just I can certainly send you individual slides. It's just per page, and I think that should be. You can use it that way. But if you bring it up as a PDF file, I think you can zoom in.
I've not tried. I can't.
It doesn't work?
No.
Okay.
And unless I'm missing something, and I certainly don't have the pro version. But I have not found a way to zoom. Is anybody else?
Well, let me send it again, 1 page per slide, or maybe 2. I'm afraid that
some of these numbers are so tiny. That if it were just text, I wouldn't have a problem. We've got some pretty little spreadsheets on there.
Yeah, I don't know what the file is going to look like in terms of the size of it. It may be too large to be emailed. We may, Jay will send this out. We'll look at it. If it is too large, then maybe we'll put it in a Dropbox and it will give you a link that you can then open it up as 1 page.
That's fine.
That should be, we'll get around it. These days, many people do use their phone as their computer, so we try to be, to submit as a small file as possible. I did get lost for connection for a few seconds, so we're going to meet next week, and the same time, on Thursday, and I will send a new PDF. I'm thinking that some of those tables, we may send you just a page of that table.
That's just so that they're readable, yeah.
Yeah, so it is legible, and in that way you can review them on paper and print them. Anything else I missed? And revised the residential. residential capacity, commercial capacity stays as it is, and hopefully we will have that as a first number on our agenda for next week.
Well, Craig, this may be a question for you. Do we need to pass these recommendations along as a, do we have to pass a formal, my words are leaving me right now. You know, do we have to take
I
a
think
vote
you,
on it?
well, you can pass a recommendation along as when we finalize the full package.
Yeah, that's a common practice at the end of this process. You will send a recommendation letter to the council, and they will make the final decision.
Yeah, once this process is complete, you guys would pass along a recommendation to the council.
I'm talking about these individual recommendations on what numbers they're to proceed with in order to run the model.
I mean, it's up to you, but I typically that's not done. It's done by consensus.
I was going to say there's no real necessity to do that because
No,
that's what the committee was formed.
Yeah, typically this sort of thing is done by consensus, and then at the end of the process, you could all agree on the package.
Gotta stop the meeting.
Okay. All right. So we're going to meet next Thursday at 10 o'clock again.
Yes.
We just had another member resign.
Was that Vince?
Yes.
I was wondering why he wasn't here today.
I just got a word from Margaret. Yeah, she just passed me a note that a letter from him saying that he resigned. So we're going to have to figure out that situation.
Okay. All right. So we need somebody again from either development, building, or real estate.
We're going to keep moving forward nonetheless.
How can we? We're below the legal limit.
You have 4.
But we need 5.
I understand that, but to get trained and or discuss things, you don't need 5. You can get by with 4.
You have a vacancy, I believe, but you can hold meeting.
We just can't make any formal
Right,
decisions.
there won't
Yeah,
be
you can receive information. You can't make any decisions.
All right. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know all this stuff. We'll never get it done.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a limit?
This is also for Brian. Brian,
What's that? What, Coggy?
yeah, this is for you. I believe we have adequate number of development, real estate individuals within these 4 people that are currently on. And so any resident would qualify.
I understand that.
Who now, Tagi? Who are you saying has that background?
Yeah, the state statute requires participation from what they call real estate development.
Yes.
So the other at least 3 members. So you have, I believe, you have 3 members that can be classified as real estate development field. So the other 2 individuals.
I don't agree with that though. We've got Doug is one, Vince was another, and he's gone. Neither Dennis nor I nor Joan that I know of have experience in those professions.
I thought you were a real estate realtor.
I am not. No, that was Kathy, and she lasted 1 meeting before she resigned.
Yeah, that was Kathy Van Scowen.
Then yes, then
you can receive information, but you can't take action until the council appoints another development related individual.
Development
builder or
under real
developer.
estate.
Sorry, Brian, what'd you say?
A builder or developer.
Builder, developer, realtor.
Or real
Yeah,
estate.
right.
And we only need 40%, which is only 2 members.
That's for this 5-year period. The next 5 years, once you get into the second phase, then you have to fulfill the 3 requirements out of the 5 individuals.
Yeah, well, let's worry about now because we can't
No,
get to 10 years.
that's why I'm making the point that it's not mandatory that we have all 3 positions filled this 5-year period.
Well, and
But we will have to.
the other difference is that the people that we have now do not have to be licensed professionals.
Correct. Well,
They could be retired, whereas in the future, they will have to be licensed.
correct.
So let's work on that.
No, we're going to be working on it, believe me.
Yeah.
We were delayed on 1 minute because of 1 meeting because of a 10-day notice period. The notice have to, rephrase that. Will there be any delay because of notification?
I don't think it was 10 days. Isn't it more like 2 days?
It's 2 days, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
I will talk to Margaret today, and if there is any issue with that notification or notice to be sent out, I will let you know. And I think that's a good comment, Dennis, you brought up. If there are an issue, I would suggest that use the 2-week period meeting as a backup.
I think we ought to keep July 30th open too as we go on, because after next week, we should keep proceeding at the rapid rate that we're working at.
I agree. Okay. So next, any other things that we need to discuss right now? We want to move that we adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Coggy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Donna, do you officially need a motion?
You know, I'm not really sure because this is a.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Somebody want a second?
I second.
So moved. See you next week.
State your names for the record. Who made the motion and who
Dennis made the
seconded it?
motion.
Dennis DeVito
And
made the
Joan
motion.
seconded.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Good, Donna.
If you